This video does not end until I find my next 5-star read. I'm really excited to make this video because I've watched a lot of other booktubers make it. It's always really exciting to me going along on the journey with somebody as they're chasing that very elusive 5-star read. I really need a 5-star read right now. I think in the last 22 books that I've read, I've had 2 5 stars, and I don't like that ratio that much. So the next couple books that I choose to read will be very intentional of ones that I think could be 5 stars. I'm actually in the middle of my first one, which is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. Alex Michaelides is the same guy that wrote The Silent Patient, which I've read and I loved, and also The Maidens, which I have not read, but I've heard really good things about. I don't know if you can hear the thunder, but it is raining and super gloomy and thundering a lot, and I love it. Anyway, The Fury so far is really different from Silent Patient. Silent Patient was very gloomy, a little bit spooky, quite unsettling in a way that made you want to keep reading, and it became a real page turner towards the end. I couldn't put the book down. This one feels, I don't want to say lighthearted, but it does feel a little bit more lighthearted. It's funny. The way that it's written is super comical, which I was not expecting from Alex Michaelides. It follows our main character, Elliot, who is the narrator, and him and his friends all go to this remote island in Greece that one of the friends, Lana, owns. She's a retired movie star, and they're all really wealthy, and they're all kind of in the Hollywood industry, and they vacation on this island once or twice a year. So they go to this island together as friends, and somebody dies. That's kind of the mystery point in our book that we're trying to figure out. And Elliot, from the very beginning of the story, it's like he's writing the account of what happens. He tells us in the first couple pages that he knows what happened and he's going to explain it to us, which is an interesting perspective to have, because in The Silent Patient, our narrator doesn't super know everything that's going on just because of their mental state. Elliot is fully aware of what happened and the story, and we're the ones that are totally in the dark, and we are learning things completely on Elliot's time. He is fully in control right now, and he's very neurotic and strange and quirky and weird, and everything that he writes is very stream of consciousness, and so he will literally interrupt himself in the middle of a sentence. If he's saying something that maybe doesn't make sense or feels a little bit too biased towards a certain character or a certain person in the book, he will interrupt himself and be like, I'm sorry, I'm getting too opinionated, I need to stick to the facts. He'll do little like inserts of his thoughts and opinions in the middle of a sentence, or he'll apologize for being all over the place while he's telling the story, and it is giving it a very, very interesting vibe for reading the book, because it feels way more personal, almost like you're having a conversation with the narrator versus just being told a story, and I really enjoy that so far, and it makes it kind of funny to read. So I just got to the point in the book where the murder happens, and so I am really dying to figure out the rest of it. It's raining, it's gloomy, it's kind of chilly and feeling like fall, and I am just going to probably take a bubble bath and read the rest of this book, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, I did finish The Fury a couple days ago, and I've been sitting with it trying to think and process my thoughts on the entire book, because I go back and forth. I love the writing in this book so much. I love it probably more than The Silent Patient as well, just because it was really interesting the way that he did it, but I think the ending frustrated me quite a bit. So let's start at the beginning. Our narrator is a guy called Elliot, and he starts off the book addressing the reader. So there's kind of a close relationship between you and the narrator the entire book, and he kind of even describes it as if we're sitting down at a bar, we're ordering drinks together, and he's telling you a story, but you know that he's writing it down in some sort of journal, or maybe he wrote a book, or maybe it's a blog or something like that. So there's already this fourth wall connection break between us, which I'd never read a book that did that method so strongly, and it really did it a lot here. And Elliot, as he's telling you this story, says many times that he's trying to be an unbiased narrator and not give his full opinions and thoughts about the things that he's talking about, but he obviously does. He's kind of like neurotic and all over the place when he is talking and telling the story to you, and he will literally interrupt himself and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, or that's just my opinion, it's not actually pertinent to the story right now, and continually addresses the reader while he's telling the story. He even, like, halfway through the book, before we kind of get to some crazy twists and reveals, he's like, all right, let's pretend that you've ordered yourself another drink at this metaphysical bar that we're sitting at right now for this story, and I'll continue on. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of the book, and it kept me super engaged and mostly curious about Elliot and his part to play in the story itself. So we have a couple characters that we follow throughout the entire book. Obviously Elliot as our narrator, and then there's Lana, who's kind of the main character, honestly. The story is about Lana, and Lana is this middle-aged, retired Hollywood actress that just is described as being beautiful and charismatic and very magnetic to the people around her, and everybody just loves her. So it's Lana's best friend, Kate, who is a theater actress and an alcoholic, and it is Lana's husband, current husband, Jason, who she actually met because Jason was dating Kate, and they met up one time, and then Lana and Jason just kind of like instantly fell into a passionate relationship pretty immediately and got married from there. Those are our main characters. There's a couple side characters as well that are along for the ride. There's kind of like Lana's assistant slash house manager, her 18-year-old son as well. I wonder if you can hear that. Her 18-year-old son as well is involved. It takes place on this Greek island. It's very and then there were none because a murder happens, and you know a murder is going to come in the book. The narrator tells you at the very beginning, there's going to be a murder. And the whole time you're trying to figure out who is actually going to be murdered, and it is not revealed until the very end of the book. It was very interesting how it was written. The thing that I didn't end up liking about the book itself is that I feel like the author was really trying to outdo himself and upstage himself from his previous books, The Silent Patient. And I haven't read The Maidens, but I'm assuming that it's kind of similar in the way that the twist is revealed. I feel like he's just trying to go above and beyond for this one, which means that the last like 50 pages of the book, there's like 10 different giant twists and reveals. And as soon as you think that one thing has happened and oh, that's the big reveal of the book, it actually turns out to be something completely different. And I felt really jerked around towards the end, and kind of like it was an unnecessary amount of excitement, if that makes sense. I don't know, it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for the book as a whole, and I think that that knocked my rating down quite a bit, but at the same time, the writing style I enjoyed so much that it kind of knocked it back up. I think that after sitting with it for a couple days, I'm landing at about a 3.75. I don't think I like it enough to give it a 4-star, but 3-star feels too low, so I'm landing at a 3.75 with this, which means that the video continues on as we search for a new 5-star. Which means that my next book is going to be The Book Swap by Tessa Bickers. I think this is a pretty new book. I actually just randomly came across it in a bookstore the other day, and I liked the cover a lot, and so I picked it up and read the excerpt from it, and I am super interested in this. It basically follows our main character, this girl who I don't remember her name at the moment, but I'm gonna find out soon, and she accidentally gives away her favorite copy of her favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, which has a lot of notes in it in the margins and a lot of things highlighted, and it just means a lot to her. She gives it away to a library, and then it gets checked out from the library, and it takes a while for her to get it back. So finally she goes to the library, finds her book a couple weeks later that has been returned, and there's new notes in the margins, and somebody is talking back to her in her favorite book. And then I think she goes on a book swap with this new pen pal person, this guy, and they swap books back and forth, and they swap notes back and forth, and that's kind of how they develop a relationship, and I am all about that prompt. So we're about to go on a 7-hour car trip to Nashville, and I have like 5 books that I'm bringing with me, but I'm gonna start with this one and see how it goes. Yeah, so I guess this is the nature of these videos, and I'm still not totally used to the concept of the vlog style, so bear with me here. But full disclosure, we're back from Nashville. I did not read the book swap while I was there or in the car. I tried to. I started it. I got maybe 50 pages into the whole thing in the car ride, and then I got very, very carsick for some weird reason, and it wouldn't go away, and I couldn't read for the 7-hour car ride. So what we ended up doing is listening to the graphic audiobook of A Court of Mist and Fury, which was really, really funny. Completely my husband's idea, who's been reading the ACOTAR series. We've already done a reaction video of the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and he was nearly done, maybe like 2/3 of the way done with A Court of Mist and Fury, and we finished it with the audiobook driving to Nashville, and then driving back we almost finished A Court of Wings and Ruin, and he has a little bit left to go in that book as well, so hopefully we'll be filming his reaction videos to those 2 books pretty soon. I am not an audiobook person at all. I have such a hard time paying attention and retaining information from audiobooks, which is why I don't usually listen to them, but there was something about listening to an audiobook. One, the graphic audio is fun because it's dramatized, there's voice actors for everything, there's music, there's sound effects. It was very interesting listening to the graphic audio version, but also listening to an audiobook of a book that you've read multiple times before. Like, I know the story so well, so it almost took off a lot of pressure that I put on myself to pay attention, and if I went in and out of attention or my mind started to drift elsewhere and then I would attach back to the book, it was easy for me to do that because I already knew what was going on and I already knew where we were. So that's actually what we ended up doing on the car ride to Nashville and kind of in Nashville. But now we're leaving again and we're driving a couple hours up north to a cabin to have a little reading, writing retreat for me and my husband, and I will be finishing this book. I'm going to read it. I will say at like 50 pages in, it's not quite what I was expecting. I do still love the premise. I think it's really cute and smart. I'm not loving it so far, but we're so early days into it that I'm not making a judgment call yet. So we'll see how it goes and we'll give a verdict hopefully at the end of it. So let's go. Okay, so we have made it up to our cabin and it's very beautiful here, very perfect for cozy fall reading, and I have finished the book swap. This book was not quite what I was expecting when I said the summary. For one thing, it's not an actual building of a library, it's a little library. It's like the neighborhood libraries that you find, which actually I like even more. That's very, very cute. So our main character is Erin, and she kind of just does a spring cleaning act, and her best friend had died a couple years ago, and she is really still in the grieving process with that and figuring that all out. And one day she just kind of wakes up and is like, I'm ready to start fresh, gets rid of all of her books, but accidentally gets rid of her favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, which had special notes from her best friend and little writings in the margins and everything that she thought about the book, and it meant a lot to her, and she accidentally gave that book away. And then the next time that she goes back to the little library, when she figures out that she gave that book away, it is missing, and it's very devastating for Erin. And so she continues to go back and check this library basically daily to see if anybody's going to give it back. And one day she sees the book back in the little library, and wouldn't you know it, there's new writings in the margin, and there's this guy, this mystery guy, that is now responding to her notes in the margins. And at the end of the book, he asks her to meet him in a different book. And this goes on for a long time. They read books like Great Expectations, they read some Charles Dickens stuff, they read Beloved, they read Pride and Prejudice or Jane Austen or something. And so there's a lot that they go through, and in each book they're answering questions about each other in the back of it. They're starting to get a little bit more personal and starting to kind of slowly fall in love. That whole premise, I absolutely love. That is right up my alley. It's so cute. I think it was done really well and really believably. It's everything that happened outside of that I didn't really like at all. Firstly, our main character Erin is kind of a brat, pretty lazy and pretty selfish. At the beginning of the book, she kind of quits her job immediately just because she doesn't really like it that much. A job that she had been at for many years and is really, really good at, but her boss is kind of a jerk. And so one day she's like, I've had enough. And she just quits her job, and now she has no income and she lives in London, and that's an issue. Secondly, as I said before, her best friend died years ago, which of course is a very tragic thing and very difficult thing to get through, but she is not moving on, and she is using that tragic incident to drive wedges between her and her family, her and her other friends. She is fully isolating herself. I guess I could understand that if it was written in a way where her friends and family weren't supportive or didn't understand what she was going through, but the way that the author wrote her friends and family, they're amazing. They're just trying to help Erin and just trying to love Erin, and she just paints Erin out to be a brat. And honestly, she doesn't really grow throughout the whole instance. She remains a brat from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. Our second main character, it's a dual perspective, and I didn't know that going into it, but our second main character is James, who is currently the mystery man writing in Erin's books. He is really sweet and kind of two-dimensional, not a lot going on, except that he was bullied in high school really badly, like abusive, horrible bullying. And I will say one of the scenes is depicted very graphically, depicted in a way that definitely could be a trigger warning for anybody that has issues with stuff like that. So if you are interested in reading this book, I feel like I'm not really selling it that much, but if you do read this book, just know that going in, because I was really surprised by the scene and how graphic it got. So he was bullied in high school, knew Erin in high school in this small town that they're both from, and they were friends for a bit, but had like a massive falling out because of something that happened between them that I won't spoil. He carries that weight around with him everywhere he goes as well. Now, these two people are in their 30s, and they just are written in a way that feels extremely immature. They feel like they are kids still that refuse to move past their problems and refuse to deal with conflict in a way that makes sense and is mature of them. And I think that's my main issue with the book, is that the two main characters I just didn't like. They just weren't great. I loved the premise of how they start to fall in love, even though they technically knew each other in high school before this book happens, but they're meeting in the books again, and they are learning to like each other without their preconceived notions about each other, which I really, really liked that plot mechanism. I love the writing the notes in the margins bit. I think it was written really, really well, but it really was all of the character foundations and development that happened around that, and just how the story went in general afterwards, that I disliked. It was not great. So I'm giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars, which means that we soldier on looking for our 5-star book. The next book that I have decided to read is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This was kind of a surprise pick for me. I have obviously seen this book around plenty of times. I've only read one Lynn Painter book before, and it was Happily Never After, which came out earlier this year, and I didn't really like it that much. It felt kind of surface level, and again, I didn't really like the characters, and the conflicts didn't make a lot of sense to me, and it just wasn't my favorite. But I've heard that her young adult books, crazy enough, have more depth to them than even her adult romance books, and I've heard that everybody just loves this one. So I'm gonna give it a try. I bought it because the binding is really, really pretty, and because the sequel to this just came out. So I have both of them. We're gonna see what happens. But this one, from the premise on the back, it kind of feels like a book that is combining like 10 Things I Hate About You, The Duff, if anybody knows that movie. This premise feels very, very similar to The Duff, where basically our main character, Liz, and her next door neighbor, Wes, who are not friends, but they grew up together, they kind of strike up a deal to try and get Liz's crush to notice her and to like her. And they work together, and then I'm assuming out of that, they start to catch feelings for each other, and we're gonna see what happens after that. So that is what I'm reading today. I just ripped my jeans sitting down. That's really funny. Okay, well, I have been blitzing through this book, Better Than the Movies. I am just over halfway now, and it feels really good to be reading something that is entertaining enough and engaging enough that I just want to keep going as quickly as possible. I've really been enjoying it, which is, to be honest, a bit of a surprise. I haven't read a book where the main characters are still in high school, at least a romance-centered book where the main characters are still in high school. probably since I was in high school. And I didn't think that I would like that as much because naturally I feel like a lot of people can sympathize with this. The younger the characters are, it's harder for me to relate to them. It's harder for me to put myself in their shoes in the storyline. So sometimes I try to avoid books like that. But I think that Lynn Painter actually does a really good job of making it relatable to everybody, making it really sweet and heartwarming. I've just seriously been enjoying myself so much and I'm really excited to finish it. So probably let's just go ahead and do that. They just kissed. So we just got back home and I finished Better Than the Movies and I really, really liked it. So the whole premise is kind of like high school rom-com, and like I said, I wasn't really expecting to be able to connect to the characters as they were in high school. And so I kind of went into it with a little bit lower expectations, but the story itself, how Liz and Wes's relationship grows to a friendship and then to something with a little bit of romance, Liz's connection with her mom who tragically passed years before, and her dealing with the fact that she is in high school and she's having all of these big life moments like going to the prom, applying to colleges, and she has to do everything without her mom, and that being really tough, and her kind of experiencing and going through new waves of grief. That was really interesting. I was very surprised by the amount of depth in this book, honestly. I thought that it was going to be a lot more surface level and cheesy and cringy, but actually it was really, really sweet. I think my only complaint is kind of the third act breakup conflict, how that was treated. I think that it slipped a little bit into the non-communication, miscommunication trope, which I really don't enjoy that much because you're just kind of reading and you're like, this would be solved so easily if you just talked to each other and had an honest conversation. It's very hard for me to like have sympathy for them when they're going through something that is objectively really dumb. But they get back together, they make up, it's fine. I think that the act of them making up also happened really, really fast because it happened in the last like 5 pages of the book. I was shocked by how quickly we went from being mad at each other and a final act breakup to wait, we're in love again and everything's fine. It was a bit jarring. And kind of because how that last bit of the book was treated and written, I think I knocked it down a little bit. Still like much higher than I was expecting. I'm giving this a 4 stars. I'm telling you, I was going in kind of negative about this. I was expecting not to like it. I really liked it. And there's a second one that just came out and I'm gonna read it and that's gonna be great. But it is not my 5-star book that ends this video. So we continue to move on to find want. The good news is I started The Ministry of Time in the car on the way back and I am not quite 100 pages in, but I'm a little bit in. I have a good feeling about this one. I'm really feeling very emotionally connected to everything. So far, what I know is that the British government has figured out time travel, and the way that they are using the time travel and experimenting with the time travel is bringing people back from the past, but they've chosen very specific people that are not necessarily like historically relevant to British history or American history or whatever. They're bringing people back that aren't crazy relevant. They're also bringing people back that are about to die in their own timeline. So by taking them out of history, they're not affecting the past because they're about to be dead. And if for some reason they react poorly to the time traveling in the present tense and they die, it also kind of covers up the government because they were gonna die anyway. So what's wrong with them dying now? Basically, they take these time travelers from history and they connect them to a human in the present tense to kind of acclimate them to 21st century culture, and they live together and they learn history together, everything that's happened since they died. They learn colloquialism, the language of present tense London, basically. And so we follow our main character who is nameless. You never learn her name in the book, which is actually really interesting, but it's first person perspective, so you almost don't feel like you need to know her name. And her time traveling expat, as they call them, is Graham Gore, who is from 1847, and he was on an expedition to Antarctica, I think, and died from freezing to death. And so they plucked him out of history and they dropped him with our main character, and he is currently acclimating to 21st century, and it's very interesting and I'm having a great time. I have to read this quote though. It happened really early in the book, and I specifically made a note of it because it was on page 48, not far into the book at all. I am newly acquainted with this book, and it hits me with this quote that says, "An underrated symptom of inherited trauma is how socially awkward it is to live with." And that really got me. This author didn't need to go that hard that quickly. And I think it's gonna be a really intense read for me, and I'm really excited about it, and I'm hoping for a 5-star now. So let's finish this baby. Listen to this quote. "Remember that being in love is a form of blunt force trauma. I was concussed with love for him. I bent my head to the cudgel." Okay. An ingeniously imagined, hilarious romp through time, space, and the human heart that announces an exhilarating new voice in contemporary fiction. Ha ha! If only. Yes, okay, maybe this announces a new exhilarating voice in contemporary fiction. I'm not arguing with that point. But the hilarious romp through time, that's the part that I have an issue with being on the jacket cover of this book, because this is not a hilarious romp through time. I thought, getting into this, that it was going to be like a Kate and Leopold rom-com. They live together, they slowly start to fall in love, and then time tries to keep them apart, but then they choose each other in the end. That is not what this book is. This book is extremely intense, extremely emotional. It doesn't feel a lot like a rom-com to me. There's espionage, there's action and adventure, there's violence. It is funny. There are times that it is funny and heartwarming, but even 50 pages in, when we last spoke, I was having a good time. It still felt very lighthearted, but maybe with an undertone of something else is going on here. It just got deeper and deeper and a little bit darker as time went on, and it deals with the government and conspiracies in the government, and obviously time travel and how that affects the state of the world and why people might want to travel through time, all wrapped up in admittedly a really sweet and heartwarming romance. And it's riddled with these emotional, hard-hitting one-liners that would put me into a real tailspin of an existential crisis. I loved it. I loved every second of reading this book. I think it was the perfect pacing. I think it was the perfect length. The characters, you are continually endeared to them as you grow to know them more. The expats, which are the people that are coming back in time, there's a group of them, and you get to know each and every one of them, as well as their bridge, or the 21st century human that they're connected with who's trying to help them acclimate to life. It's this cast of characters that is so sweet, and they're all really naive because they are brought from a different time. There's people from the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. I think 1916 is our youngest expat that is brought from time. They're dealing with dating in the real world. They're dealing with sexuality. It's really, really beautiful, but it's also written in kind of a simple and straightforward way where I feel like the author is saying, I don't need to fluff this up. I don't need to put this flowery poetic language in. This is just what I'm going to say. This is how it is. What she was communicating with her words was very direct and very well said, and I enjoyed it immensely. And the story is so cool. I've never read anything like it. Again, I thought this was gonna be Kate and Leopold. If anybody's seen that movie, it was not. It kind of was. Maybe like the foundation of it is Kate and Leopold. If Kate and Leopold then went into like governmental spy espionage, trying to save the world, but also choose themselves while finding love throughout it all. It's a whole thing. And it was so enjoyable to me. I wrote down a lot of quotes from this book, and I'm gonna read some of them because I think you need to hear these quotes, and hopefully that will convince you to also read this book. Oh, this one was so good. It says, "I started to laugh, a real, happy, unglamorous laugh. As true laughter does, it summoned smiles from the other." I think that was a really beautiful description of physical joy. It's describing a scene where all of this group is together and they're still kind of awkward around each other. They're still really getting to know each other, but her describing what laughter does to a group, not fake awkward laughter, but real, true, unglamorous laughter and how it brought out the smiles from other people. I just thought that was such a beautiful picture. And then I was thinking about different times in my life where you like really experience that. It's like, yeah, this is true laughter and it's contagious. And I just love that line. I don't know. She ends the book on this paragraph. The very last thing that you read in this book is this. And if you don't want to listen to this very last line, that's fine. But it made me cry. I ended this book crying because of the way that she writes the last couple sentences. It says, forgiveness, which takes you back to the person you were and lets you reset them. Hope, which exists in a future in which you are new. Forgiveness and hope are miracles. They let you change your life. They are time travel. I'm getting chills just even saying it again. It's so good. This unquestionably, to me, not even a doubt in my mind, is a 5-star. I loved it so much, which means that finally the curse of the missing 5-star book has been broken. We are back, baby. And this was such a good one to end this video on. I highly, highly recommend it. This is one of my favorite books that I have read this year so far. So go read it. And maybe you found something else to read from this video as well. The Fury is good. The book swap was not as good. It was fine. I really liked Better Than the Movies, but this one right here is an excellent book. So go read it. Thanks for joining in this another vlog style video. I'm still not really comfortable with them. I don't really know what I'm doing. It feels less prepared and I don't know. Thanks for watching and I'll get better at these, I promise, but I appreciate you sticking around for it and we'll see you next time.